Hello and welcome to episode 31 of the FPL Podcast by Fantasy Football Hub. FPL is back and what a weekend of action we have seen. My name is Andrew and I'm joined as usual by two of the best FPL managers in the game, former third place finisher Andy Green. How was your opening weekend gone, Andy?
It didn't start off too well. I didn't have Salah captain, but then a couple of saviours in Sice and Justin helped me climb back up the ranks.
Very nice. And we also have six-time top 10 finisher. No, we don't.
Top 10, yeah.
And we also have six-time top 10k finisher Adam Hopcroft. Adam, how did your team fare in game week 1?
Oh, wow. I think considering I didn't have Salah, to get 63 points, I think that is, I would take that. I'm pretty pleased. But I think Salah was my big downfall this week. So I might have to eat some humble pie on that, which I'm sure we'll talk about in more detail.
We will. We'll look at our teams towards the end today. I scored 53 again. Didn't have Salah, but I didn't have the saviours in Sice or Justin or anyone else. I went for the kind of rubbish picks of people like Tierney, Doherty, Alexander-Arnold, all these rubbish wing backs, and but there we go.
I think if you don't have Salah, you've got to have Sice in there to cover him. I think you have to.
Yeah. Thanks for that, mate. Welcome to any new watchers and listeners. For our YouTube watchers, if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please press the subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to ensure you don't miss anything. Also, please press the like button if you enjoy our content, and don't forget to download our new free app, which includes everything our website offers. Just search for Fantasy Football Hub from wherever you get your apps. So after a drama-filled Game Week 1, in this episode, we will take a look at the standout players from Game Week 1 who caught our eye, take a look at which of the Manchester players are the ones we think are to bring in for Game Week 2, answer some questions from our Twitter at FFH_podcast followers, share our plans for next week, review one of our Twitter followers' teams, and take a quick peek at the top of the at FFH_podcast mini league. So moving on to our first topics, we had questions from at FPL Theory and at Shiver FPL around who stood out to us most from Game Week 1. So for our YouTube watchers, we have a graphic from our Hub Optastats tool sorting players who had the most shots in the box in Game Week 1. So top of the shop, Mo Salah, unsurprisingly, with 8 shots in the box. Richarlison second with 5. Harvey Barnes had 5. Timo Werner 5. Jimenez and Andy Carroll on 4 each. So, Adam, can I come to you first? And who stood out for you in Game Week 1?
Well, there's this the player called Mo Salah looks quite good.
All right, he
looked good. I think Leeds' tactics played into the hands of Salah, and I think the way they set up, I think they really stopped Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. So there was a lot of space for both Salah and Mane, and Salah took complete advantage of it. I think he's had more touches in that game than he had in a long time, and definitely more touches in the final third. And it's been a while since he's been afforded that space. Now, I don't think many other opponents will give him that sort of space, firstly. But I think the sheer ruthlessness, his overall play, I thought, not necessarily from an FPL perspective, but I thought it was just a brilliant performance from him. I think, people can talk about being lucky from penalties, but he made the first penalty by cutting in and shooting. And he got a little bit of luck getting the one towards the end. That was, a bit naive from Rodrigo, but I thought Salah looked good, but then again, it's fine margins, because Mane had that goal which was ruled out for offside. That goes in, and when one of the penalties aren't awarded, I don't think it's, I think looking back at it, I don't think it's all doom and gloom for people that picked Mane. Other players that stood out, I thought Zaha was brilliant, and I think Saints typically play quite a high line, and he got a lot of space in behind. So I think Zaha could be an option, quite a nice price point as well at 7 million. Richarlison looked good from an FPL perspective. If not, I think a little bit wasteful at times. I think he was a bit rash on a couple of occasions, but I like the look of him. And then I think there were quite a few defenders that stood out. I think the Wolves' defence looked, other than Fleck hitting the post, looked very resolute, and I think they've sort of started from where they finished. And I think there could be some really good options at Wolves. I think Reece James taking corners, shooting, putting balls in the top corner from 25 yards. So I think there were a few decent options this week that stood out, and I think Arsenal's performance was very good as well. So I was quite impressed with overall from Arsenal.
I think the thing with Reece James as well. So I play fan tracks as well, and obviously as you're looking through, the thing with Reece James, which is most impressive with me, is he also wins a lot of headers, wins a lot of tackles, and does all the things that are maybe, not really seen as kind of, FPL traits as well. So, as well as being a top defender, he has all these attributes. He's got the ability to smash him in for 25 yards and on corners. So if he can retain that place, which is obviously up in the air, right? Obviously, he looks like a fantastic option at 5 million, especially with Chelsea's upcoming games from game week 3 onwards. Andy, who stood out for you this week?
Obviously Salah looks like the Salah of 2-3 years ago. I guess we can't say that for sure after one game against Leeds, who didn't really seem to change their system to accommodate, and so there was left a lot of space there for the wingers. Richarlison looked great, although it's a question mark as to how you can fit him in if you're going to be going for the likes of Salah, Bruno, and Aubameyang in the midfield. But I think he's clearly the outlet at the moment for Everton. I think Jimenez looked very dangerous. It was a bit of a call. Yeah. I think many people went for Ings over Jimenez simply because of the Palace fixture, but I think that was clearly a mistake. I think he's looking very, very sharp in quite an aggressive Wolves team. Podence looks good as well, so he's got a lot of supply there, and this is without Jota even in the team. So potentially he could come in and make them look even more dangerous. Going down the list there, I would say I thought Antonio actually played fairly well, considering he was kind of left up top by himself, but they've got some nasty fixtures. And I thought Werner, considering I know they scored 3 goals, but considering he didn't really have a lot of supply, I thought he did pretty well. 5 shots in the box there, as you can see. Looking forward, I'm not sure how Jorginho fits in that midfield, so hopefully Werner will come on to penalties. And then with Ziyech, and hopefully Ziyech on the wing and Havertz and Pulisic supplying him, I think he still is very much kind of, although he's in my team right now, he's still kind of top of my watch list in terms of players to look out for.
And looking at Wolves as well from game week 3, so obviously they're away to Man City in game week 2. From game week 3 onwards, they've got West Ham, Fulham, Leeds, Newcastle and Crystal Palace as the next 5. So for anyone doing an early wildcard or planning one, like myself from game week 3, players like Jimenez and Saiss, as example, are both, at the moment after one game being kind of nailed on in my team, I think, for game week 3, because that is a very, very nice run of fixtures they have there. Other ones I kind of noticed, I thought that Gabriel at Arsenal, he is a good price. He looked good. He got the goal, obviously, which kind of inflates it a little bit. But he gave that Arsenal defence a kind of a sense of assurance, which they don't kind of normally have. I thought that Jamal Lewis from Newcastle was very, very attacking, and I think for a 4.5 million player, he could be a really nice choice moving forward. I thought Harrison for Leeds, I thought his goal, their first goal, I thought it was absolutely sensational goal. The way he took it down, knocked it around the defender, and smashed it in the bottom corner. If that would have been someone like Sterling, for example, it would have been shown all over the world. Oh, is this the best goal of the season already? Because it was Harrison and they lost. I don't think it got quite as much, as much glory as it should have, personally, but I thought he looked very, very good as well. I think that Callum Wilson will do well at Newcastle. I thought he looked good.
Yeah, I agree.
But he's also got a lot of support around him as well. He's a bit of a poacher. Willian, obviously, he looked good. Even for the first goal, when he got the assist, he was stood about 2 yards out from goal. He's on all set pieces. We know he's brilliant at corners, free kicks and everything else. So Willian, again, for one, potentially like myself, looking at a replacement for Aubameyang potentially, in game week 3 or 4, whatever. I think Willian fits the bill there nicely. I think he could almost match him potentially. And I thought that Che Adams was quite unlucky as well, actually. He had that shot brought off, marvellous save off Goit. And I think if that had gone in, we'd be talking about Adams maybe in a bit of a different light. I thought he looks very, very dangerous. And for 6 million, I think he looks a really good option. So obviously, Salah, Richarlison, all the ones you guys have said, but they're the other ones who kind of stood out to me. And very, very exciting options there, actually. And a lot of them at budget prices as well, and with nice fixtures. Okay, so for our second topic, we had questions from at FPL Circle and at Cull _ around which Manchester players we should be eyeing up to bring in for game week 2. For our YouTube watchers, we have a graphic from the Hub's comparison tool comparing Bruno Fernandes and Kevin De Bruyne's form post-lockdown. As our watchers can see, Kevin De Bruyne massively outperformed Bruno Fernandes in terms of expected assists, big chances created, key passes, crosses and through balls, whereas Fernandes had slightly higher expected goals, big chances, and they were fairly level on shots in the box and shots on target and shots. So it looks like Kevin De Bruyne's form post-lockdown, statistically wise, was quite superior to Bruno's. So Andy, can I come to you first on this one? Which are your choice of Manchester players going into game week 2 and potentially 3?
Well, I think I'm certainly going to have both by game week 3, barring any injuries. It's a very difficult call to make on which one. I think City will be, over the course of the season, probably the more attacking team. We saw that last year with regards to output and XG, I think. But I think in the short term, I think you've probably got to be focusing on Man United assets simply because, and I'm talking very short term, because, the Palace fixture up for Man United, and obviously Man City play Wolves. So Wolves carried on their defensive prowess. I think they registered like the fourth best defense in game week 1. Of course, opposition to take into account. However, I think they look very organised unit. They've brought in Martial there at left back, who looked pretty solid. Who knows whether Vinagre gets a game? It's a bit of a touchy topic on FPL at the moment, but I think there's more likelihood of returns from Bruno than there are from KDB, just fixture dependent there on game week 2. However, as I say, in terms of both being fantastic FPL options, I cannot disagree with that. I think, you should be looking over the course of the season to find spots in your team for potentially both of these players. Now, the one question mark is, we've seen the high frequency of penalties. We saw Man United, obviously, with a large number of penalties last year. I think it was like 13 or 14 over the course of the season. Maybe it was even higher than that. Stopped counting, actually, towards the end. So that is a more attractive option for them. We still have to see how the Man United team sets up with Donny van der Beek. Is he going to be, taking a more advanced role there? But, everything I saw last year points to the fact that everything's going to go through Bruno in terms of, assisting. What we don't want to see, though, is Bruno assisting the assister. So that's something to watch out for. But I think game week 2 specifically, I think I'd be on Bruno over De Bruyne. But it looks like they're both going to rise tonight. So if you're going to make those transfers, make sure you make one of them at least tonight.
You should have wildcarded seeing game week 2. What about players like Martial and Greenwood, Andy? Have you got your eye on either of those?
Yeah, Martial was one that I had penciled in for Ings until Salah did. Salah had that performance in game week 1. So now my strategy is somewhat changed. We'll get onto that later. But, Martial is definitely a great option. It's just that, as I mentioned with Richarlison, you can't have them all. It's pretty simple. You can't have Aubameyang, Salah, Bruno, Martial, Werner. I mean, at some point, you've got to look at, not just the player, but also how your team is structured, and I think having even 3 premiums in midfield makes it quite tough to bring in. Certainly, it makes it impossible to have Werner and Martial up front. Believe me, I've tried. So for me, in the short term, I'm going to be looking at Bruno over Martial, although I think they're both great options.
And how about you, Adam? Your thoughts on Man United and Man City players?
I think firstly on Man United, I think there is a bit of a rush to get them. But I think we've got to remember they've come back to pre-season a lot later and have had quite a lot of disruptions that other teams haven't had. They played Villa the weekend, lost 1-0, and there were a lot of key players not involved. I just had to get that in there. But there were a lot of key players not involved, and I think Bruno's only going back to training this week. So I think whereas they're playing Palace, they've played a lot of pre-season football, so I think it'll be a really tough game for United. I think Palace will, I think they'll give them a decent game, and there could be a surprise there because they're going to be a lot fitter, and I think fitness early on is really, really important. Palace will counter-attack them, which is perfect. That's what they want to do with the likes of Zaha and Townsend, who we've been talking about. I think it's going to be quite a tough game for United. The one player from United I've not heard talked about is Rashford, and I think he's not turned into a bad player overnight. I think looking at it post-lockdown, he got 3 goals, 3 assists, but his expected assists and goals were, up there with the best out of any United players, particularly from open play. So I'm tempted by Rashford, partly because I can do it in one move. And I think having seen Havertz's, I don't want to call it it was a horror show. It was just it was disappointing. I mean, I think he will take time to adapt. Having seen his debut last night, he was very, very nervous, and I think he'll be a player that we might want, but I'm not sure for the next 2 or 3 game weeks. Whereas Rashford, he gets the extra point for a goal, extra point for a clean sheet. The only downside is he doesn't have penalties anymore, and I think that's why Bruno is such a huge pull. I like Martial as well, and I think he'll have a good season. But I do think the fact he's a striker in FPL limits his points potential. And I also think that if I was looking at having 2 players, I would rather have a cheaper striker and a more expensive midfielder, because I look at the midfield options, there's nobody below 7 million that I'd really be interested in. Whereas if you look at the strikers in that bracket, someone like Chris Wood at 6.5, you've mentioned Callum Wilson. There's a certain player called Ollie Watkins who's going to take the Premier League by storm. So there's plenty. I just think if you look at the striker options in that bracket versus the midfield options, and I mean, a lot of us have got St. Maximin stinking our teams. I mean, I think the only solution there, maybe Trossard. He looked okay yesterday, but there aren't many players in that bracket that I would want to be having. So I think Martial does take up a forward spot where there's good options, and I think he can be replaced a little bit easier by the likes of Jimenez, Ings, etc. So. I think on Man City, I think they'll win the league this year. I'm expecting big things from City, and I'd definitely be looking to get KDB or Sterling in the week after. Possibly tempted by the double up, but we'll see how they. Possibly, I think. I just think they'll score the most goals, and I think again, if you look post restart, if you look at what they did versus Liverpool versus the other team, they were significantly ahead. So. I will be looking at definitely either KDB or Sterling for game week 3.
Yeah, the one thing about Man City this week is if I fully expect Jesus to start over Aguero. I don't think Aguero's match fit anywhere near it, and Sterling's more than likely to be up against Traore at right back. So although Traore's got immense strength and immense pace, he's clearly angled to be more attacking than the defensive side of things. So potentially Sterling could get some good action there on the left side of Man City, but
he got a brace, didn't he, this time last year, and I think he played through the centre. So I wonder if Pep will do something similar, because he had a lot of success in the last game at Molineux. So it'll be interesting. But I think Wolves have shown how tough they can be, and they'll be a little bit ahead in terms of fitness of Man City. So I'm personally going to stay away from that fixture. I think one thing I would mention, and I think I know Ferg is on this already, but that wildcard game week 3, I can really see the benefit of it.
Here we go.
Ferguson,
you've got him.
I might try and hold out a little bit longer, but I think the early wild card, as you're starting to see things happen, I do it every season, and more often than not, it works out. The only thing stopping me is that weird game week in 18-19. I don't know. We'll wait and see on that one, but there's definitely a lot of merits of going early with the wild card.
But couldn't you just take a -4 this week and next week to kind of, because you were talking about that pre-season?
Yeah, maybe. I think this week I don't see the value in a -4 because there wasn't many players. I mean, we talked about a few, but there weren't many players I thought that were out of this world that I absolutely have to get. And I'd even put, I think Salah and versus Mane, I think for the Chelsea game, that might suit Mane more, but I think particularly away from home, so there's no rush to make that transfer. So I think I want more data. And to see more teams. So that's one thinking maybe game week 4 or 5 might be the optimum point for the early wildcarders.
I don't want to go kind of mad on the wild card, and maybe this is when we can discuss ahead of next week, because I think there are a lot of FPL managers kind of eyeing up a game week 3 or 4 potential wild card. But I think there's a couple of teams who have started off very well, who maybe we didn't expect them to start off as well. And there's some players as well. So I'm looking at, teams like Everton and Wolves I'd use as an example. They've got some really nice fixtures from game week 3 onwards now. Probably players like, Jimenez, Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin, Podence, Saiss, these, Luca Dean, these may not have been players that a lot of players have got in their game week 1 team. And I know Andy mentioned hits, but the hits you're planning are still hits that don't involve any of those players. We're still talking about Bruno, KDB, your plans are just moving along, and you've still basically got your game week 1 team there, haven't you? I think this is why I'm so pro a game week 3 wildcard, is because you can get in all those players. You can potentially get in Willian, instead of Aubameyang. You can get in Jimenez for that amazing run. You can potentially get in Luca Dean. I thought he looked really good yesterday. There's even players like Greenwood and Foden, who we haven't mentioned yet because obviously, of what happened, and it's all gone a bit silent since. But if Greenwood and Foden kick on this weekend in game week 2 and score a goal, we're all going to want them in game week 3 or 4 as well, because they're the enablers. So to Andy's point he mentioned earlier, how can we afford Salah, Aubameyang, Bruno, Werner? Well, by having players like Foden at 6.5, Greenwood at 7.5, they're the kind of players who open up the options a bit more. So this is why I think the game week 3 one for me is still a kind of, optimal time. But
I don't want to put more ideas in your head, but I think if I was wildcarding, looking at the fixtures for game week 2, I'd be very tempted. So you've got Everton, West Brom. West Brom looked pretty flat. Everton looked great.
Agree.
So you got, the Calvert-Lewin, Richarlison, Digne there. Leeds, I think, looked very attacking, and actually defensively, they weren't, despite losing the 3 goals, they weren't too bad. And up against Fulham, who looked like, they're almost certain for relegation. Then you got Man United, Crystal Palace. I take on board what Adam was saying with regards to Man United fitness, but they looked superb at the start of the restart, I believe. And Arsenal up against West Ham. I mean, there you've got your wildcard team.
Yeah, agree.
With a couple of Man City ones there.
Yeah, sure. So we'll move now on to teams. I've got a few of those, but obviously I don't really want to take hits going into a wild card. But I've got a couple of those. But that game week 3 for me, there's a lot of upside there, even with Spurs, right? So Spurs were awful. Now, if they improve this week, their next 3 home games are Newcastle, West Ham, and Brighton. Just as an example there. So while everyone is still moving in, slowly moving in these Man United and Man City assets, with still the same team they started with a game week 1. Really wildcarders can really move with the times, I think. And and I think something I learned at the back end of last year was I've always been very much, and I think it's worked actually. I've never been very quick to move to new trends, and I think in the past you haven't really had to, because it's a lot of the time it's been the same players, or the same sort of players have generally done very consistently season in, season out. But I think last year was the first time we saw players like use Vardy in the first half, Mane in the first half. Just examples, players who wouldn't know, those kind of players who wouldn't normally do really, really well, like year in, year out, actually being the best players in the game at that time. And a lesson I think I need to take into this year is to actually not just sit on my laurels on who I think are the best players, and to try move with the times a little bit. But anyway, we're going off piece now. Okay, so we also had 3 final community questions. We'll answer 1 each, so we'll do this every week. We haven't got time to answer every single question, so I picked 3 at random. Andy, you've got first dibs on which question you want to answer out of those 3. Adam, you take second, and I'll take whichever one's last.
Well, I'll take a Copenhagen All-Stars question, which is with Everton starting well and some lovely fixtures ahead. He's considering a move from Trent Alexander-Arnold to Digne. He realizes it's not a popular move, but what would it take you to drop Trent? I wanted that question because I did a similar move last year at some point, and it cost me about 20 points and I think a -4 to get Trent back in. Quite simply, that Leeds game was a bit of a aberration for Liverpool. They actually still posted the 3rd best XGC, and Trent for me is, I think he was probably first name on my team sheet, first or second name on the team sheet. He has the attacking output, he has the clean sheet potential, he has the bonus potential, takes set pieces. I mean, simply there's no, I think if he was 8.5 million, he'd still be in my team. So I think to be very short term and looking at Everton's fixtures, I'd probably be wanting to keep Trent and rejig the rest of your team to try and bring in. Do not remove Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Okay, fantastic. Adam, which of the other two do you want to answer?
Okay, so I'll take Shiver FPL's question. Should we prioritise Everton assets over United assets for game week 2? I think it depends on your team setup. I think that they've got some really good value options. I think with Charlison, James Rodriguez, Dina, Calvert-Lewin. So I think if you can get them in easily rather than taking a hit to get United, I think absolutely. I've got concerns with United being up to speed from. I think they will beat Palace, but I think it'll be a tight game. So I think actually if you look at their fixtures past that, I don't think it's essential to have United players, and I think Everton, based on how they look the weekend, could be some really better priced alternatives. So I think Fernandes at 10.5. If you're having him as one of your 10 million plus midfielders, fine. But I think if you're having 3 of them, it starts to then affect the balance of your team. And you've not just got to consider Fernandes in isolation. It's Fernandes and the other player the other dud player that you've got. So I think Everton, exceptional value, great fixtures. I think there is an argument if you've got no Everton to look at some of their options.
Cool. Which leaves me with Combe O'Connelly's question. I hope I pronounced that right. There's a lot of C's and G's in there. Is a -8 for game week 2 a shrewd move to get in United and City heavy hitting assets this early in the season, or should we all focus on putting out the 2 or 3 fires we all have on low value assets as opposed to dealing with them in game week 4 to 6? So I would say wildcard game week 3, but other than that, I'm not sure -8 is really worth it for United and City. So I think City have got that hard match away to Wolves. I think they'll score a couple of goals, but I can't see them scoring 3 or 4. So you're kind of reliant there on picking the right asset. In terms of United, I agree with Adam and Andy as well. I don't think it's going to be an easy game, and I think that's partly because United haven't played much football. Palace also kept out Ings and Co on the weekend, as Andy mentioned. They've had a pre-season, so again, I can't see United just turning up and steamrolling them. I would suggest getting in. If your plan is to get Bruno for the long term, I would go for Bruno. If you want to take like a -4 to get someone else in, but I don't think it's essential for game week 2 to get in all these players personally, knowing what we know now. Game week 3 onwards, I think it may be a different story, but for game week 2, I think you're safe with Bruno from an ownership view and the fact he's class player, he's at home on penalties, but other than that, I wouldn't go mad.
I think just on the ownership point, the thing you got to think about is if people have got Bruno and they haven't got somebody else, and it's they might not have Salah, they might be spread thin across their team. Yeah. So I think I wouldn't worry too much about from an ownership perspective.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Adam. Okay, so on to our teams then. So we've got Andy's team up first. Andy, are you able to read your team out for our podcast listeners and tell us your plans for game week 2?
Sure, yeah. I've got in goal, I've got McCarthy. At the back, I've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Kyle Walker-Peters, Ayling, Justin. So although I wasn't that impressed with the Southampton defence, I've got other moves to make. I thought Kyle Walker-Peters looked okay. In the midfield, I've got Havertz, ASM, Salah and Aubameyang. And up top, I've got Ings and Werner. And then on the bench, I've got Saiss is on the bench for the Man City game, Bissouma and Brewster. So my 2 moves, although I think, as I mentioned on the previous podcast, the Chelsea attack is what I'm going to be aiming for this season. I think clearly with their 2 key players in Pulisic and Ziyech not being fit, I think they're, and Havertz kind of playing on that right wing when he should really probably be playing in the number 10 role. I just don't think they're up to speed. And certainly, as I said, I think Werner played well, but it didn't really look like the team was gelling, especially in the first half. So I'm going to look to take Havertz out. Initially, I had planned to just do the straight Ings to Martial switch, but given the frequency of penalties, and I do want Bruno in my team long term, he is rising this week. So about half an hour after this podcast is over, I'll be taking a -4 to take out Havertz and Ings for Bruno and DCL. I think DCL, although he didn't look great and didn't really perform anywhere near what Richarlison did. I think the fixture is, clearly I would have Richarlison over DCL, but simply team structure doesn't work for that with regards to funding that move. But they've got West Brom up next, then Crystal Palace, and Brighton. So the team is playing well. They've got some decent fixtures, and he is the lone striker for now.
Looks a good plan, Andy, and a good team. So,
well, I hate taking hits, as you know from
this
previous videos. So this is a real
straight. Say, yeah. Okay. So we move on to Adam's team next. And Adam, could you read out your team and share your plans?
Yeah, McCarthy in goal. Then I've got Trent, Ayling, Justin, and then in midfield I've got Mane. Aubameyang will be captain, St Maximin, Havertz, and then up front I've got Calvert-Lewin, Werner, and Adams. My plan originally before the Chelsea game yesterday, I was thinking I'll save a transfer, but having watched Havertz, I think it's a bit of a confidence. He didn't take risk. I think he's played off the right before, so I don't even think it was a positional thing. I just think he played very much within himself, and I think there's a possibility he could get benched for Liverpool. I think he might take a while to get up to speed. I think Werner looked fine. He looked good. He looked lively. And I know you've got a knock for the penalty, but which might have impacted. So at the moment, I can do a straight move. I can go Havertz to Rashford, which I might do. I think I would prefer Bruno, but if I do bring Bruno in, I've got to do a -4, and I would have to worsen another spot in my team, which I'm reluctant to do, so I think I'll potentially to go with Rashford.
So you got Rashford and Mane, where everyone else will have Bruno and Salah. Very, very differential, mate.
Yeah, you could. One thing that someone was pointing out to me is actually the Chelsea defense is not as bad as people think it is, particularly at home. So I know Mane performs better away from home, but I know it's crazy to think that when we watched Chelsea last night with Alonso and Reece James very attacking, not defensively minded. But the only other option would be to go Mane and Havertz out.
Yeah, I have considered that, and with Mane, I don't think he did too bad against Leeds, and I think in general him and Salah tend to match each other. So I think I'm going to give him another go, and just he's got his so it's his final chance to impress me. But I think I can. It means not taking a hit. I think you're right, though. There is the possibility. The other reason for keeping Mane as well is that for ease of bringing in players. So in my head, I've got that I want those 2 big premium spots, and if I get rid of Mane and then use up the funds, I've only got one 12 million, 11.5 million spot, and I think that could be a risk. So my plan is to use these 2 to rotate captaincy. And I think I'll try and get to. It might end up being either Mane or Salah, and then Sterling and De Bruyne, and then use those 2 to mix it up. I could bring in Bruno. I do have doubts about United for this game on the weekend though, because I don't think they'll be firing on all cylinders. And I think Palace, I think the fact because they played loads of warm-up games as well, which, I mean, they seem to have a friendly every other day before the season started. So I think they'll have a big advantage over United. There'll be a big difference in quality, but for that reason, I don't think they'll get thrashed.
What about the week after then, Adam, when you still haven't got Bruno? You'll be looking at Kevin De Bruyne and things like that. I appreciate your decision for 1 week, but unless you're wildcarding in 3 or 4, you're leaving yourself awfully exposed.
When you look at ownership, maybe, but I back Rashford, and I think if we're going from a statistics point of view, if we look at the Hub prediction tool, if you look at FPL Review, if you look at all the prediction tools, everybody else seems to back Rashford as well over Bruno. Fair enough. We can look at ownership, but I've never really played off ownership, and I think Rashford. Whilst there were some things I didn't like about his performances at the end of last season, in general, he was always getting chances and being involved, and I think it only takes for him to be more clinical, and he's capable of getting double figures for goals and assists.
I just looked at just to back your point up there. Actually, I just looked at the restart Manchester United. So, they all played 9 games basically. So there's nothing really on the minutes, but they're all up north of 20 for shots. XG or NPXG, so not including penalties. Martial 3.71, Rashford 3.38, which is great considering Martial scored 6 goals and Rashford only scored 2. So yeah, he did underperform really his stats. But then if you include penalties into it, Bruno comes up top.
But then if you look at expected assists as well, and I think the fact that £1 million does make a difference, I think, for the balance of my team. I think if I think if I get Bruno in, I will get rid of Mane. That will be the route I'll go, because I don't think I can do it. Because I could end up putting Che Adams down to a 4.5 million striker. Maybe long term, but I don't know. I think it'll be a backwards move for this week, personally.
Fair enough. So finally, looking at my team then. So I've got McCarthy in goal. I've got a back four this week going into game week 2. I've Alexander-Arnold, Doherty, Tierney and Luke Shaw, who I benched in game week 1. I've then got Aubameyang as captain. I've got Havertz. I've made my transfer already. I actually made it on Saturday night. I don't think I've ever done this before, but I actually made a transfer prior to my player I'm taking out even playing. But I was just so concerned about the price rises, and obviously with Bruno, he wouldn't be playing. I actually did Son to Bruno because I kept the money back at the exact money to do Son to Bruno. So I've done that, and he's my vice. And I've then got Callum Wilson, which I'm pleased with. I think he did well last week, and he's home to Brighton this week. Calvert-Lewin, again, I'm pretty excited to have him actually, and Werner up front. So as mentioned, I've already made my transfer of Son to Bruno. If I was to do another one, 4 minus 4, bear in mind I am wildcarding as soon as the deadline goes on this one and the game's updated. I would potentially do Havertz as well, but I am really looked into massively who it could be. I was thinking of Willian because they've got that nice 1 game home to West Ham and he looks pretty good. The only issue is, because I'm wildcards in game week 4, I'm not giving any more time for the hit to pay itself back. So if Willian basically doesn't outscore Havertz by 4, then I'm losing out. But that's my team at the moment. I'm reasonably happy. I'm a bit disappointed the way the weekend went. Probably the same as everyone else who didn't have these, but I had Justin kind of in my draft all the way through. I had Seiss in my team, and all this, and I opted to not have Salah. And the impact of not having Salah was to be able to upgrade all these defenders to premium ones. And as it happened, Salah banged, the cheap defenders banged, and my more expensive defenders didn't. I thought Doherty was a little bit, unlucky, could have scored. But that's the way it goes. Still scored 53. It's above average, obviously, which is what you aim for every week. So it's not, it's not like a massive disaster. But I was hoping for a little bit more. Thought I was a little bit unlucky. But
again, I'm not trying to talk you into a game week 2 wildcard here, Andrew. But if I look at the likely price rises this week, right? You got Bruno.
Yeah.
De Bruyne is going to rise.
Yeah.
Gabriel's going to rise. Calvert-Lewin's going to rise. I know you've already got him. Justin's going to rise. Marshall's going to rise. Salah's probably going to rise. Digne's going to rise. Probably Vardy. I mean, all these players you're going to be bringing in.
Yeah.
So you're going to lose at least 0.5 million, right?
So I mean,
I'm not saying you're going to have all of them.
No. I think out of that list you mentioned there's probably only Digne who I will definitely have in my game week 3 wildcard. I've got Bruno already. I've got Calvert-Lewin already. I think looking at my strike,
you're not going to have De Bruyne.
Oh, sorry, and De Bruyne. But I think looking at my strikers, I think I'm probably going to opt for Jimenez over Martial now for game week 3 for their run of games, Wolves' games, which are pretty fantastic. But other than that, yeah. So there's only De Bruyne there who I'm probably going to lose the 0.1 on. But yeah, no, it's a really good point, and I was pretty big in preseason, obviously, about getting the rises and getting the cash in the bank. But I still think, according to Luke Wilson's analysis, between game week 3 and game week 5, we see the kind of masses of action. There'll be a lot of drops and a few rises. So hopefully I'll be able to avoid the drops and get on some rise as well. But more importantly for me, get to that core team I talked about quite quickly in game week 3 to be able to advance every week rather than booking in transfers a week or 2 down the line. So that's my team there. And we also have, so at FPL_boom won the raffle this week to review his team. So just to go through FPL Boom's team, he has got McCarthy in goal, Alexander-Arnold, Justin and Taylor, Aubameyang captain, Bruno Weiss. He's got Havertz and Saint-Maximin. He's got Martial, Calvert-Lewin and Werner. I don't know why he's asking us for advice. His team is better than all of ours. But he's already gone Salah to Bruno and Adams to Martial. But he said he's starting to regret it already. While Salah is on form, surely his excellent stats were down to the high line and playing style of Leeds. He's never scored at the Bridge. Plus, I can bring him back in for Arsenal at home. So I think he's looking for a bit of confirmation bias that taking out Salah was the right thing to do. Adam, what are your thoughts on that?
If I had Salah, I definitely wouldn't have taken him out this week. I think he's a confidence player as well. So I wouldn't have done that personally. I can see the logic though, and he's probably had a plan prior to the start of the season and stuck to it. So fair play on that. But I think it's a brave man to remove Salah, coming from a brave man not to own Salah game week 1. So what do I know?
Okay. And Andy, what are your thoughts on FPL Boom's team?
Yeah, I mean, I had plans initially, I think, pre the kickoffs to take out Salah, but then, as I said, he did look like the rejuvenated Salah of old. The interesting thing is he's only owned by 36% right now, so he will likely rise by the time FPL Boom can get him back in. But I guess he's willing to accept that loss of price. But the team looks great. I mean, it doesn't get much better than what he's got there. I mean, I think Havertz is the only question mark, but in theory he might come back into the middle, and that might be a more suitable spot for him. But no, listen, obviously the transfers are made. You can't have any hindsight here. But yeah, certainly if he continues his form, you should be looking to bring him back in for the home fixtures.
I think the tip I would give, so he did these transfers on Sunday evening, I believe, which is before the games on the Monday evening. So I would just be a bit careful, especially if you're taking hits, because obviously Vinagre, he didn't start. Havertz didn't look good there either. So if you'd have waited until those games, I'm not sure if you'd have made the same choices or not potentially. But I wouldn't be taking hits before the game week has gone moving forward. But in terms of Salah, I personally think you're doing the right thing. Even though Salah looked really sharp, I fancy Bruno to outscore Salah this week, potentially in game week 3. So I wouldn't be too hard on yourself there. I just wouldn't take hits before the game week has played out personally. Hopefully that has helped you, FPL Boom, or given you some confirmation bias or not. Just a reminder to all that if you do want to have a chance to have your team reviewed by us on the podcast, then you need to do the same next week, which is retweet our podcast tweet with your team. And finally, we take a quick peek at our at FFH_podcast mini league in joint 9th place. We've got On the Mendy by Nuruddin Hakim, joint 9th as well. Skinny Legs United, Keith Dickens, as well as Emmanuel by Olamide Fayamu. In 8th place, we've got Favelados, Roberto L. Castro. In 5th place, 10 jerks and a squirt, Adam Fearing. As well in joint 5th, A Step Too Far by Richard Riley. Again in joint 5th, Gunner by Ermias Habtum. In joint 3rd, Shanice Dowaji FC. Also in joint 3rd, Dr. Zayek by Will King. In 2nd place, It Is What It Is. Michael Fernley is scoring 101 points. But at the summit of our at FH_podcast mini league is Mount Me Greenwood Tim Lee, who scored 103 points with a game week rank of 7,708th. Fantastic work, really good work there, Mount. He did use his bench boost actually, but for those who are listening, he had McCarthy in goals. This is just for back line. He had Seiss 15, Tierney 6, and Reece James as his back line with 3.
Lovely.
He had Aubameyang as captain, Salah, Havertz, and Saint-Maximin. He did have Antonio and Adams as well, actually. So he had a fair few blanks, and he had Werner, and then he had Leno on his bench. Obviously got the clean sheet. Ward-Prowse got 2, Vinagre, who didn't play, and James Justin 9. So his defence got him, 21, 35, 44 points between 4 players, his defence, which won him, which takes him to the top of our mini leagues. Many congratulations, Mount Me Greenwood. Great stuff. If you haven't already, make sure you join our FPL Podcast Mini League. There will be a prize for first place, including a guest appearance on our first preseason podcast of next season. The Mini League code is LV24ZG, or our YouTube watchers can join using the auto-join link in the description below. So many thanks, as usual, Adam and Andy, and to our loyal watchers and listeners for their great questions and comments, as usual. We really, really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Adam, where can people get hold of you?
A Hopcroft 13 on Twitter.
And Andy, what about you?
On Twitter, FPL Fantasy Guide.
Cool. And my Twitter handle is @Fergie222. So this video recording will be on the Fantasy Football Hub YouTube channel, with the podcast versions available on all major podcast platforms. If you like what you watch, please press the like button. And remember to subscribe to the channel in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And if you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast, leave a comment. It really does help us increase our rankings. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok are @FFH_HQ. And our podcast Twitter handle is @FFH_podcast. Please follow and feel free to ask any questions. And remember to retweet with your team next week for a chance to get it reviewed on this podcast. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk, where you will find everything you need for fantasy football, all under one roof, including player comparison tools, the fixture ticker, Opta stats, top player, team reveals, brand new and groundbreaking points prediction tool, and much, much more, all of which is on our new free app, which you will find wherever you get your apps, searching for Fantasy Football Hub. To join thousands of other fantasy managers and sign up to the Hub to use all our amazing resources, just click the top link in the description below. You will not regret it. We'll be back next week reviewing Game Week 3. Have a great week, everyone. See you then. Good night.